All right, so when you think about prehistoric Earth, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably a T-Rex, right? Big teeth, tiny arms, the classic. But what if I told you that long before the dinosaurs showed up, our planet was ruled by a totally different and honestly way weirder set of monsters? We're gonna go way, way back to explore the world that came first. Yeah, it's easy to think of dinosaurs as the OG monsters, but the truth is, the creatures that were running the show before them, hoo boy, they were something else. Stranger, bigger in some ways, and yeah, you could definitely say more terrifying. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're jumping in our time machine and heading back 350 million years. This is the Carboniferous period, and you gotta forget everything you know about Earth today. Just picture this, a single giant steamy swamp covering the planet. It's hot, it's humid, and everything is growing to enormous sizes. It was a world made for giants. So what was the secret sauce? What made everything so huge? Well, the biggest factor, the one thing that changed all the rules, was the air they were breathing. The atmosphere back then was packed with a jaw-dropping 35% oxygen. And just to put that into perspective for you, the air we're breathing right now is only about 21% oxygen. So yeah, the Carboniferous atmosphere was basically supercharged. It was like high-octane rocket fuel for life, letting things grow to sizes that are just, physically impossible for us today. So what happens when you pump the world full of that much oxygen? Well, creatures that aren't great at breathing, like insects, suddenly get a massive upgrade. And they grew to, well, let's just say horrifying sizes. You had dragonflies, the Meganera, with wingspans the size of a modern hawk. But even that was nothing. That wasn't the final boss of the creepy crawlies. No, the real king was this thing, Arthropleura. I want you to picture a millipede. Now picture that millipede being the length of a small car, almost 3 meters long and weighing 50 kilograms. It's the biggest land invertebrate ever. And sure, it mostly munched on plants, but it was no picky eater. If a small amphibian was too slow, it became lunch. Just imagine that, crawling through the undergrowth. No thank you. All right, so that whole age of giant bugs, it was wild, but it couldn't last forever. Let's fast forward about 50 million years. We're now in the Permian period, and the world is changing, big time. The continents are all smashing into each other, forming one massive supercontinent called Pangaea. And the climate, it's starting to get a lot more hostile. Those steamy, global swamps started to dry up. The world got cooler, and all that extra oxygen in the air started to disappear. This was, as you can imagine, really bad news for the giant bugs. Their whole world was falling apart. But for another type of animal, this was the perfect opportunity. A door was opening for the rise of the reptiles. See, reptiles were built for this new world. They had tough skin that held in water, and their lungs were way more efficient. They could handle the dry air and lower oxygen just fine. You start seeing critters like the Dimetrodon, the one with the big sail on its back. But the top dog, the apex predator of this entire era, was something else. Something truly nightmarish. Meet the Gorgonopsian. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this thing was a monster. Think fast, powerful, maybe even warm-blooded. And oh yeah, it had massive saber teeth. As if that wasn't weird enough, it also had a third eye, a light-sensing pineal eye right on its forehead. This creature was actually a distant relative of us mammals, and for a very long time, it was the undisputed king of the planet. So, for millions and millions of years, these strange and powerful reptiles ruled Pangaea. It must have seemed like their time would never end, but it was all about to come crashing down. I'm talking about the single worst catastrophe that life on Earth has ever faced. Now, we all know how the dinosaurs went out. Big rock from the sky, right? This wasn't like that. This doom didn't come from space. It came from deep inside the Earth itself. The planet was literally tearing itself apart from the inside out.
And what happened next was this horrifying domino effect. It starts with volcanic eruptions in what's now Siberia, but not just any eruptions. We're talking eruptions on a continental scale, spewing so much ash and toxic gas that it choked the entire sky. That led to acid rain, global wildfires, and then a runaway greenhouse effect that just cooked the whole planet.
The result was, well, catastrophic doesn't even begin to cover it. The oceans basically died. Life was almost wiped out completely. Think about this number, 95%. 95% of all species in the sea vanished, gone forever.
And it wasn't much prettier on land either. About 70% of all life on land disappeared. This whole event has a name, the Great Dying, and it is, without a doubt, the closest life on this planet has ever come to being completely erased. It was a total reset. Life itself was just hanging on by a single thread. But it wasn't completely erased. In the smoldering ruins of this global apocalypse, a few hardy survivors clung on. Little burrowing creatures, some of our own early mammal ancestors called cynodonts, and a really tough group of reptiles known as archosaurs. They just hid out, deep underground, waiting for the world to heal, and waiting for their chance. The world that came after the Great Dying was desolate. It was a harsh, empty planet. This new chapter, the Triassic period, was basically a blank slate. A brutal, empty arena where the few survivors would now have to fight it out to see who would rule this new world. And make no mistake, this environment was a nightmare. Oxygen levels were dangerously low again, and Pangaea was covered in these vast, scorching deserts. To take over a world like this, you couldn't just be tough. You needed something special. You needed a serious evolutionary advantage. And it turns out one group of those archosaurs had exactly that edge. The very first dinosaurs. They had a whole toolkit of adaptations. They developed this upright, two-legged stance so they could move fast. They had this incredibly efficient breathing system, kind of like birds do today, which let them thrive in the low oxygen air. Plus, their tough skin and hard-shelled eggs meant they were perfectly built for a dry, hostile world. They were, in a way, designed for this apocalypse. So when you look at the whole timeline, it really puts it all into perspective, right? You go from the giant bugs of the Carboniferous to the weirdo reptiles of the Permian, then through the absolute worst extinction event in history. And only after all of that did the ancestors of the dinosaurs finally get their shot at the title. But they just needed one last little push to get over the finish line. There was another, much smaller extinction event right at the end of the Triassic, and it conveniently wiped out most of their remaining competition. And with a totally clear field, the dinosaurs just exploded onto the scene, and they began a reign that would last for an unbelievable 150 million years. And really, this whole insane story just proves a fundamental rule of life on our planet. Massive destruction creates massive opportunity. The Great Dying was the worst thing that ever happened to life on Earth, but it's the only reason the dinosaurs ever got their chance to rule. It makes you think, doesn't it? It kind of leads to one last big question. When the next great extinction happens, what new monsters will be waiting in the wings to take our place?